This is Residence 104.4 FM. Flipping marvellous, of course. Yes. I'm Nick Hennegan, and welcome to another edition of Literary London. You lucky love. And we're also, of course, on bohemianbritain.com if you'd like to check out past episodes from here as well. And we're also on YouTube and all over the place, really. Hey, get everywhere. Yes, like a rash. Yeah, and we've got a sort of vaguely request-based show today. People often get in touch. I've got a new email address as well. You can still use radio@mavericktheatre.co.uk if you want, or you can use nick@bohemianbritain.com. Yeah. Bit posh, isn't it? nick@bohemianbritain.com. We'll get you to me, yeah. And that's, of course, if you've got an event coming up or you've created something. Maybe you've written a poem or a book or, well, you know, anything really. Haiku, just let me know. And because we're actually going to start, this is an occasional feature that I think I'm going to do a little bit more of. And it's basically poems from famous people. Excuse me. Celebrity choices. There's a book called Poems That Make Grown Men Cry, edited by Anthony and Ben Holden, which is rather good. 100 Men on the Words That Move Them. And I was moved by this poem and choice by none other than the writer and broadcaster Melvyn Bragg. Melvyn Bragg. Welcome to the South Bank Show. You know Melvyn Bragg. That was a terrible impersonation. But he's a bit of a clever boy. I saw him a few years ago at the Birmingham Library Theatre. Excuse me, when I was... we got a show on there at the Birmingham Library Theatre. I've got a show on at the moment, by the way. If you're in West London for the next few days, or tonight... finish it on Saturday the 29th. We're doing a version of 2, Jim Cartwright's classic play. It's going very well. Thank you for asking. Yeah, yes. Good audiences, tears for all the right reasons, and occasional standing ovations. I'm actually going to go to Birmingham as well. We're going to Birmingham in June, I do believe. The 3 nights, the 13th, 14th, 15th of June at the Billesley Pub, which is not only the pub on the estate where I was born and dragged up, it's also where we first started doing plays for people that didn't go to see plays. Yeah, we did. So it's going to be great being back there. I may talk more about that later. I probably will. Well, why not? It's my show. I can do what I like, can't I? Can I? I can't. All right. I'll behave. Right, so let's get back to these celebrity poems. So writer and broadcaster Melvyn Bragg was born in 1939. He's actually a bit of a pretty good writer himself. He's published more than 20 novels, including, was it Grace and Mary in 2013, I think, was his last book. Can't remember. I should have checked, shouldn't I? But he's also done 14 works of non-fiction, including The Adventure of English in 2003. He's written 2 books for children and 4 screenplays, which I didn't realise, including The Music Lovers in 1970 and the screenplay of Jesus Christ Superstar in 1973. Of course, he's best known, I guess, for the several decades that he spent presenting ITV's The South Bank Show and also on BBC Radio in Our Time. He was created a live peer in 1998, and as I say, I did meet him the one time in Birmingham, and I found him to be a good lad. He gets the seal of approval, yes, the Hennegan hit. It's better than having a blue tick on Twitter. I've got one, by the way. You know, this blue tick stuff on Twitter. If you don't do social media, just ignore me. I've got one, and I don't know where it came from, and I can't believe Elon Musk would give a little old insignificant like me a free tick. Anyway, yeah, watch this space. I'm talking about ticks, not ticking about talk. TikTok. Oh, come on, concentrate. Come on. Okay. So, Melvyn Bragg has chosen as his favourite poem, Sonnet 30 by William Shakespeare. Of course, we celebrated Shakespeare last time, and if you haven't heard the programme on that, then if this was YouTube, I'd say put a link in the bottom, but I can't, because my bottom's nowhere near this radio show. But do have a listen on bohemianbritain.com. You'll find the Shakespeare there. And Melvyn Bragg wrote, the reason he chose Sonnet 30, and I was quite blown away. You'll hear why. He wrote, I've never been able to read this sonnet to the end without stumbling and then stopping. It is the final couplet that finishes me off, and yet it says the opposite of what the poem has made me feel so acutely. All great poems are about each one of us. This speaks as directly to me over the centuries as any evening's phone call from a close friend. What is described is a condition we all find ourselves in, and increasingly so as we age. For me, this is Melvyn Bragg, for me it paints a picture of my thoughts and feelings when I think of my first wife who took her life more than 40 years ago. Wow. I didn't know that about Melvyn Bragg. I feel as responsible, as guilty, and as ashamed now as I was then. The first 12 lines bind the past and the present so accurately and poignantly that you see no division between them. And that, for me, is the great power of the piece. In the poem, Shakespeare moves from consideration of time to friends, to love, to sights, and the resurrection of ancient woes. All these magnetised my past and present feelings about Lise. And somehow his optimistic last two lines, which redeem the rest and even rebut it, are those I can never meet without tears. Perhaps because his dear friend is living and mine is not. Wow, that was Melvyn Bragg. Excuse me. Very powerfully explaining why he loves this sonnet. And here is the sonnet, and apologies because, I'm not a trained actor. Sonnet 30 by William Shakespeare as chosen by Melvyn Bragg. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown an eye unused to flow for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances forgone, and heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of forebeknowned moans, which I new pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored and sorrows end. William Shakespeare's Sonnet 30, written, we think, in 1609, and the choice of our celebrity poem chooser, Melvyn Bragg. Ah, that's lovely, isn't it? You've got to wait for the final plunks at the end of that. That's called The End. It is, of course, music from the film, the motion picture, Shakespeare in Love. And then before that, you heard the rather emotional story of why Melvyn Bragg loves William Shakespeare's Sonnet 30 so much, in memory of his first wife, who over 40 years ago took her own life. Wow. This is Resonance 104.4 FM. How you doing? I'm Nick Hennegan. It's Literary London, also on bohemianbritain.com. And as I've mentioned before, if you're doing anything in London or actually anywhere in the world. Hello, Kath from California. Kath from California. She emails me most weeks, says, I'm still on the beach. She must never get off that beach. Listens to us in California. On the beach. It's nice, isn't it? Yeah. I'm thinking of going to Wales in a couple of weeks. Oh, that's cool. Cardigan Bay. California. Well, they both start with a C, don't they? Oh, go give me Cardigan. Well, I say give me Cardigan Bay every day. I've never actually been to California, but I'm sure it can't be as good as Cardigan Bay. Cymru and Bath and all that. Sorry, if you're a Welsh speaker, I do apologise for kind of getting that wrong. I can speak. There's a little pub called the White Lion. What is it? Pint of Lager. Yeah, they always understand me. And in fact, bless them, there's a lot of Welsh speakers who will occasionally not talk in Welsh if I'm in the boozer, which is kind of nice. It's only a very small village, and it's a place in mid Wales, near Aberaeron. This is the big town, and yes. So we should be heading off there, hopefully, in a couple of weeks, once my current production of 2 at the Tabard Theatre is finished. Yes, we should be at Llanon. I can't say that properly, but Llanon. Lovely little place. So we're now going to go back into London books, and this time we're looking at Liquid History by John Warland, which is a kind of an illustrated guide to some of London's greatest pubs. And we're staying slightly with Shakespeare. We can, because it's April, and he's obviously the world's greatest poet, or at least, blah, blah, blah. Not the world's greatest, the greatest English poet. Yeah? Okay, we'll go with that one. And there's a great little pub which I've been to quite a lot because we actually, you may or may not know, by the way, I run the London Literary Pub Crawl. I had this idea a few years ago and wrote a script, and we did it for the Olympics in 2012. We actually missed the Olympics by a month. They wouldn't put the Olympics back for me. But we did this thing, and of course, through the glories of the internet, it just kept selling, and is still selling today. In fact, it's starting to get busier now. We're recovering from the lockdown, which affected everyone. And I haven't done it this year because of the fact I've got a show on at the Tabard Theatre in Chiswick in West London called 2 by Jim Cartwright. Yes, I'll mention it again. But what we often do each year is a Shakespeare birthday walk. I used to work, a few years ago, I was company manager at Shakespeare's Globe on the South Bank. And it's a great little area around there, much nicer now than it was when they were building the Globe, because the warehouses sort of to the east of the river were well dodgy. You didn't want to go anywhere near there. But it's a much nicer area now, gentrified, and of course the Globe, Sam Wanamaker's great idea, is one of the reasons why. And if you kind of go down to London Bridge, there's a great little boozer there. It's called the George Inn. It's a galleried coaching inn. And Geoffrey Chaucer mentions it, no less, in The Miller's Tale. He writes, "But first I made a protestation round that I'm quite drunk. I know it by my sound. And therefore, if I slander or missay, blame it on ale of Southwark. So I pray." And the George Inn in Southwark is actually, on nearest tube is London Bridge. And it's a groovy little place. Is it? Yes, the old operating theatre's round the corner. That's worth having a look at as well. And it's basically featured in this book, Liquid History, the George Inn. I say we meet usually when we do the Shakespeare birthday tour pub crawl. Really, this is where we meet. It's kind of weird because it's not all there. But the Romans, of course, clip-clopped their way past the front door of this pub and over the River Thames into Londinium around AD 43, and then Chaucer's 14th century Pilgrims, before Shakespeare finally made it his local as well in the 16th century. So it's got a bit of a history. The Bard, apparently, often hired the courtyard prior to construction of his famous Globe Theatre along the riverside in 1599. Not where the current Globe is, by the way. It's not quite there. It's a bit further down. Come on our tour and I'll show you. You've only got to wait till April. Hundreds of people would squeeze into the courtyard and take their place amongst the penny stinkers, apparently the unwashed masses who paid a penny to join the crowd of pickpockets and charlatans. The Georgian Shakespeare's productions. The groundlings, I think, was another term. But while the more affluent theatregoers would be afforded a less crowded view from the raised galleries. The present-day building dates from 1676, and it is the last remaining galleried coaching in the city. It is quite rightly Grade 1 listed, the same status as Westminster Abbey, and it's now owned by the National Trust, so hopefully they're going to look after it, because they're good, the National Trust. It's a real slice of architecture, so rare that only a third, though, of the original building remains. So you have to kind of imagine the old inn encompassing all three sides of the yard. So the other two sides have gone. There's only one side left. It's still very impressive. And of course, in the past, horses would be stabled or reshod here. Sustenance would be sought, and the galleried section of the inn would offer a room for the night, a sort of precursor to the motel, if you like. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales begins at the long-lost Tabard Inn, which was a few doors down. Come out of the pub, turn left. In fact, all that's there now, we do go to that on the Shakespeare birthday tour. All that's left now is a blue plaque. But it's, worth sort of looking at. Of course, that was where the Canterbury Tales was a successful pilgrimage to the tomb of Thomas Becket, and that was where they were rewarded with a meal in that Southwark hostelry. Or Charles Dickens, of course, another local writer, he would also apparently pop in en route to visit his father in Marshalsea Prison, further down on Borough High Street. There is still, I think, last time I was there, because actually the studios of Resonance FM used to be on Borough High Street, and Marshalsea Prison, I think the back wall is still there, and it was a debtor's prison. Charles Dickens' father went to prison for debt, couldn't pay his bills, which is why Charles had to leave school, and arguably he worked at a blacking factory down by the embankment. It's not there anymore, of course, but I think that was what gave him some of his ideas for the characters and the deprivation that he had gone through. He used to write about it. So he'd pop in there, I think, and then inspired by, also Dickens, inspired by the characters observed there, the pub actually finds its own place in Little Dorrit, gets a name check in Little Dorrit. And actually, Charles Dickens' original life insurance certificate is framed next to the bar. Oh, yes. Even Sir Winston Churchill dropped in for a drink. Well, but as a man of discernment, of course, he wouldn't drink the local brew. No, of course he wouldn't. But instead, he'd bring his own port and pay corkage on it. So as road journeys kind of increased from 20 miles to over 100 miles a day with the advent of rail and motor vehicles, the use of coaching inns was circumnavigated as such, and all the infrastructure and stabling fell by the wayside. Although I think the Gents' Lewes are still a stable. Anyway, it's another thing. I'll have to check that out at some point in the future. Yeah, it's if you're female, don't worry about that. Thankfully, though, rather than being turned into a heritage museum, the George continues to do what it knows best and simply offers a welcoming pit stop to weary two-legged humans rather than the four-legged equine variety. And of course, they mention in the book, don't forget to toast the boozing bard on the 23rd of April, with St George's dragon-slaying antics, handily tallying with the day of Shakespeare's believed date of birth. And whether you want to relax in the idyllic sheltered courtyard during mild weather or huddle by the creaky floor of the Parliament Bar on a winter's day, it's a venerable pub for all seasons. I see what you did then. Yes, a pub for all seasons. So, worth checking out. The George, it's 75 to 77 Borough High Street in Southwark, SE1 1NH. Borough High Street, Southwark, SE1 1NH. And if you go there, say Nick sent you. They'll go, who? No idea. But yes, thank you. Liquid History, thank you. It's a great little book and a great little pub. It was quite surreal when they opened the Shard, because you can stand in the courtyard and look at this incredible 16th century or 15th century building, 17th century, 1600s building, and then you just kind of look to the other side and there's the Shard, arguably certainly one of the most modern architectural marvels of London. It's a grand life, isn't it? Oh, yes. And if you do find you're having a quick slurp in the George, then have a look at the Tabard. And what I'm going to do now, this is a bit surreal, because I'm going to play you the prologue from Canterbury Tales, read by Neville Coghill, bless him. But it's in the old, original, ancient English. So you have to kind of listen quite hard.
When that April with his sure saughter, the drucht of March hath perced to the rote, and bathed every vine in switch liqueur, of which virtue engendered is the floor. When Zephyrus eke with his sweeter breath inspired hath in every holt and heath the tender croppes, and the younge sonne hath in the ram his halfe corsi runne, and smale fooles maken melodie, that slepen al de nicht with open eie, so pricketh hem natuur in hier courages, then longend folk to goen on pilgrimages, and palmers for to seken strange strondes to ferne halves, coeth in sundry londes. And specially from every sheeres ende of England to Canterbury they wende, the holy blissful martyr for to sake, that him hath holpen when that they were sake. Befell that in that season on a day, in Southwark at the tabard as he lay, ready to wenden on me pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout courage, at nicht was come into that hostelrie, well 29 in a compagnie of sundry folk, be aventuri falle in fellowship, and pilgrims were they alle, that toward Canterbury wolden rede. The chambers and the stables weren weede, and well they weren aised at the beste. And shortly, when the sunne was to rest, so had he spoken with him every chon, that he was of here fellowship anon, and made forward early for to reise, to take our way, there as he yo devise.
Yes, it's a little complicated, isn't it? It's that's the prologue, of course, for Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and it's ancient English, read in the original ancient English. It's kind of almost impossible to decipher, although it's quite similar in some ways to our current tongue, isn't it? There's also a lot of German in there as well, as you can imagine, from the way that, the whole invasions and the Vikings and you could go on forever. But I just thought I'd share that with you. Oh, and of course, if you do go to Southwark and you check out the pub, the George Inn, then round the corner of the Borough Market, just over the road, and we include that on our Shakespeare birthday tour as well, because there's a pub there that's featured in a famous film about a boy wizard. Yeah, you guessed it. A pub from the feature film Harry Potter, actually featured in the book as well. It's also in the film Harry Potter. I'm not sure which one, but that soundtrack was called Harry in Winter from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the original film score, movie soundtrack. I've only just realised, written by Patrick Doyle. I had no idea he did all the Harry Potter stuff. Clever bloke, Patrick Doyle, Paddy Doyle. He used to be an actor. And in fact, it was Sir Kenneth Branagh, I do apologise, Sir Kenneth Branagh, who got him involved in composing because he knew he was quite good at it. And so Patrick Doyle was also he was in Henry V. He did the soundtrack for it as well. Rather clever man. He also did a brilliant soundtrack for Much Ado About Nothing. And in fact, I think all the films that Ken Branagh's made, Paddy Doyle's done the soundtrack for. He's also done Harry Potter. So the boy done good, didn't he? Yes, well done, Patrick Doyle. Well, that's our little trip down Southwark, and emotional little trip, I think you'll agree, certainly as far as Lord Bragg is concerned, Melvyn Bragg. But that's all we've got time for this time. Thank you so much for your company. If you'd like to get in touch, you can now email me at the new address, the new email, nick@bohemianbritain.com. Nick, N-I-C-K, nick@bohemianbritain.com if you've got anything happening or you want to have a chat or whatever it be. Absolutely anything at all. Have a fantastic week. I'll see you next time. I'm Nick Hennegan. This is Literary London on bohemianbritain.com and, of course, on Resonance 104.4 FM.